Welcome to my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast with me, Tiffany Jo Baker, where we help you experience God's power and rest in your purpose and progress as you move forward step by step in all the things God has called and created you to do at home and around the world. Hi, y'all. This is Tiffany Jo Baker, and welcome back to my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast. I am really excited to dive into this topic with my guest here today. We're going to be talking about healing through forgiveness. And if you've been around for a number of episodes this season, I'm really diving into healing journeys, and not just for our bodies, but for our souls and our spirit, really about emotional healing, inner healing, and walking out what God has called us and created us to do from the most healed and whole place that we can get to. We don't want to leave anything that Jesus paid the price for. We want to have all of it. And so that's what we're really here talking about today. And my guest is going to be sharing her journey of healing through forgiveness. And her name is Anne Wooten. So Anne, thank you for joining me here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm blessed to be here, and thank you so much.
Well, I know sometimes when we get into these topics, being vulnerable and sharing, um, that's a part of the journey, but it's also not always the funnest part of the journey or the most comfortable part of the journey. But we know when we do, there's so many people out there that it's kind of one of those Me Too experiences, where they're like, "Oh, I'm not alone. I struggle with that too, or I've dealt with that too." And so that's what we want to be, is that safe place for people. And so I always appreciate when people come in and share, because you're helping to create that safe place, and knowing that Jesus is there and it works. And the way he has set up his kingdom and his word is something that is transformational. So, all right, y'all. Well, if you don't know Anne, let me tell you a little bit about her. Anne is, I love this. Okay, I'm just going to read it because I couldn't say it better myself. She is a number cruncher turned faith-fueled coach. So she was an accountant for 50 years, a joyful musician, and a dedicated encourager who left a 50-year accounting career to help others break free from self-doubt and limitations to embrace God's unconditional love, one intentional day at a time. And part of your story is, you say that you had this pivotal moment back in 2019 where you realized that unforgiveness and holding on to past hurts was really holding you back and keeping you stuck. So can you kind of share with us just a little bit about that moment and your healing journey through forgiveness?
Yeah, that really was a pivotal
Mm.
moment. I will back up just about nine
Sure.
or to 8 or 9 months prior to that.
Mhm.
It's been building up for decades up
Mm.
to this point. Um, but it was one of those times where I stopped reading the Bible
Mhm.
because I was saved when I was young, very young. But when you're saved in your teens, sometimes you don't understand the entire compass of it, what it fully means, because we grow as we age
Mhm.
and we learn. And so that's just the truth of it. But what I noticed during those 8 or 9 months, for some reason, God just allowed me. I stopped reading my Bible.
Mhm.
I stopped going to church. I stopped having that daily quiet time. And when that happens, the bottom just begins to fall out.
Mhm.
Basically, you're spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was pre-diabetic, therefore, and I became a couch potato.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, when all that being said, what happens is that all of these feelings, all of these trigger things, you have time to think.
Mhm.
I think God allowed me to have this time to think because He was wanting me to taking the next steps before um, before I did anything else, because He really wanted to challenge me to say, Anne, I need for you to get to the root cause of why you were a people pleaser, why
Mm,
you were a perfectionist.
mm,
And God allowed me to do that. And I had to embrace that and
mm,
what the root cause was. And basically, kind of what happened was I thought people should be a certain way. And then, regardless if it was family or friends, and then when they don't meet your expectations, you miss yourself. You put those expectations on them internally.
mhm,
And what those come out to be, you can't force people to be the way they are. We cannot control else's actions. Therefore, that when they didn't meet those, then boom, the resentments, the hurt began, and the bitterness all started.
mm,
I was wanting some people to be a certain way. They were never going to be. I
mhm,
had to, but I had to also realize I was the root of the problem.
mm,
And I would do things to go, the people pleasing came when I would try to seek their validation and their approval by doing certain things. And yes, you would receive it, but it's only temporary. But God is unconditional,
mm,
His is eternal. So therefore, there's where this, I was looking at the wrong direction.
mm, mm,
I had become that disconnect, correct, and the unforgiveness was the part where I was believing the lies. And
mm,
I would suppress those feelings for all of these years
mm,
because I didn't want to deal with it. But it comes to a point where it, the intensity will build up ever
mm,
for such a period
mm,
of time. And when it comes to a time where you can no longer, um, you can no longer, you have to just you have to go with it because it builds up so intense you can't ignore it. That's
mm,
the word I was trying to use.
mhm,
And when that happens, you just have to back up and say, yes, you might have to revisit the past, but you've got to grasp and acknowledge what it was.
mhm,
Because anything unforgiven is going to eat you alive spiritually, no matter what. But that day, after all of that, I just stopped doing anything. I basically stopped living and
mm,
became a hermit. And depression would come in, depression. And immediately when thought, I don't know if I would have ever carried it out, but I
mm,
thought the word suicide,
mm,
just the fear of mentioning it, that broke it for
mm,
me. And what I had to do was I actually had to walk through unforgiveness,
mm,
which the first, I call it three barriers, but the first two barriers are dealing with ourselves because self-forgiveness is so important because we hold the guilt and the shame of having those resentments, of knowing we shouldn't live that way. And then the last part is when we then were able to forgive those who may have hurt us.
mhm,
And so I literally had to discover that in 29. God brought that to my
mm,
attention. And that, and afterwards, I began slowly. It was
mhm,
not overnight, but I gradually, slowly over the next 5 years to where I'm at now, it's led me. But I had to break those strongholds of where the doubt, I had to get to the root
mhm.
before because forgiveness will leave you staying stuck in that one place or leaving you to live in freedom
Mm,
with your identity in Christ, knowing, and He will show you then what you're being called to do. He
mhm,
had bigger plans for me. I had no idea what they were, but
mhm.
that was the start of the road ahead.
Yeah, you made such great points, and I'm just going to pull out a couple of them, but one, that forgiveness is not necessarily a one and done event. It's a journey. And there's things that you have to overcome along the way. You talked about barriers. Um, I think the reason why it's so difficult is because it's so powerful. And so the enemy of our soul, Satan, doesn't want us to be living free or forgiven or forgiving. And so it we have to get over these barriers and these distractions and detours, which are literally to keep us from forgiving, right? And so you
Mhm.
talked about it being a journey. You talked about the barriers that they are. And so I think it's interesting, if we can get past the mindset of, I'm not going to forgive because XYZ, because of them. They don't deserve it, or what they did to me. Um, blah, blah, blah. Like a lot of times one of the barriers is we think forgiveness is about the other person. But when in reality, if you look at forgiveness in the Bible, forgiveness is about setting us free. And it has nothing to do with them. It's about untethering ourselves from them and from what they have done. So we no longer have to live traumatized or bitter or anger. So I love the points that you made about the barriers and about the journey that it is. I think that's why Jesus is like forgiven, what does he say, 70 times seven?
Mhm.
Like sometimes it's a layer by layer. And as we know our story, different parts of our story will pop up and we might have to be like, okay, now I need to forgive this part or this thing as we go through. Um, I know you are a coach, a Christian coach, and you work with men and women and their stories and help them to live intentionally daily. Is walking people through forgiveness something that you do with coach as a coach?
Yes, it is. It's really the central theme
Mm,
of the coach because whether or not it's a decision in their career life, maybe because most of the people I work with are going to be midlife or maybe approaching retirement.
hmm
It's like I find that people are afraid to make that change, that decision that maybe God is calling. Maybe they're being called out of their professional life into something like God called me about a year and a half ago, or maybe it's taking another job or something, or maybe they've tried to take another job and it's not working. But God, so there's something that there is in their past usually that triggers the anxiety or the worry that maybe say, well, the fear of rejection, there's the fear of being judged or what have you. And then you can ask that question. It's like, well, okay, if they can figure out what the root of that problem is,
hmm
that fear, whatever. Then you ask the question, well, is there anything unforgiven? That is a powerful question to ask any client because usually 9 times out of 10, if the answer is going to be yes. And
hmm
so then when you start, and you have to warn them, walking through unforgiveness is messy, it's
hmm
disorienting,
hmm
it hurts, it's painful, but
hmm
it's necessary to learn to propel us forward.
hmm
The biggest question you got to ask, if you want to stay stuck,
hmm
then stay stuck. But if you want to propel forward and move forward and know what God is calling you to be, you have to walk through it. Can't walk around it. You must, because that is going to keep you from being stuck or living in freedom and discovering, maybe you rediscover your God-given gifts. And then you can walk forward and how God can use you within your own communities. That is vital because you start small, figure out where it is, and how just if you're just in your community, God can use you to make a powerful impact. And we have to learn to live with that intentionality. That, and like you said, with me, it was that one experience, but I went through another one in 2022 and then another one in 2023. And forgiveness is ongoing. It's ongoing every day because Romans, what is it, 3:23, for all are sinners, and for we're all sinners and fall short of the glory of God.
hmm
God knows this, and He calls the unequipped, the unqualified, and He will equip them. He'll equip us to be the qualified, and He'll empower us with His strength. But we can only do that And sometimes God will allow us to stay where we are until we acknowledge that we need that forgiveness.
Mhm. I think it's so interesting that the people you talk to and coach are often people who are in transition, who maybe want to take a leap of faith or a job change or um, work towards something new. And that unforgiveness is that like that central thing that is needed to get them from the past to the future. And that's why it is so pivotal because it can keep you stuck in those repetitive triggers. It can keep you stuck just without, growth, heart growth, but also just professional growth and spiritual growth as well. I do prayer ministry and work with clients for emotional healing and deliverance. And one of the first questions we also ask is asking Jesus, is there anybody that I need to forgive? And so I've never been in a session where there was like, no, I'm good. And even, people work with ongoing, even myself, who's been in an intentional, you know, emotional healing journey for, years, there's still layers and there's still things because we're human and we live in a fallen world that we always want to stay free. The Bible talks about in Ephesians 4:31 and 32 about getting rid of bitterness, rage, anger, and those things is to forgive as Christ has forgiven you. So it's a part of our literal everyday healing journey. And I love that you're super intentional as a life coach and somebody who works with professionals also to make sure that that's a question that's asked so that we can get unstuck and we can get free and we can move forward. And this has been so good. I know we could continue to talk. I know that flew by, and I know you have resources for forgiveness and a toolbox and a book. But where can people find you to learn more about what you do and the resources you have?
Well, I have a website and they can just go to Anne Wooten, ANNEWOOTEN.com. And that has everything there. It tells you basically that I'm here to help them with their transformation from the inside out. And it tells you a little bit about the coaching. They can schedule a free call with me, a free connect. I call it a connect call, so we can connect one another and see. And it just gives them all kinds of links. I have free resources there, free link to the book where they can purchase. It's an inspirational poetry book called Where Faith Takes Flight, One Day at a Time, and it's on Amazon. And it's got a link to my blog. And I try to do a blog post at least once a week so they can just connect with me. That's the best place because
Right.
it's got all the resources.
Great. And I will make sure to put your website in the show notes so y'all can find her. I guess just before we get off, I want you to just maybe answer in one sentence the change that forgiveness has made. Going from pain point to transformation. What would you say in one sentence has been the difference now that you've been on this forgiveness journey?
Actually, it's two things, but the main sentence is something that I wrote
Hmm.
and I have it and I use it quite often because I think it starts with my mindset.
Mhm.
Um, because our emotions will control what our heart feels.
Mhm.
And it's let gratitude be the compass of my attitude.
Mhm. So good.
And I try to live by Isaiah 40:31.
Mhm.
And that is my go-to verse. So those two things combined into one. But let gratitude be the compass of your attitude. That to me, it starts with gratitude in the morning, ends with gratitude at night.
Mhm. So good. And thank you so much for sharing some of your journey with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me be able to share just a little bit. I
Mm,
enjoyed it so much.
so good. Well, y'all, thank you for joining us here on my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast. Our my heart is for you to get free, live full, and thank God. And if this has touched your heart, and if God might be knocking and just saying, I want you to be unstuck, that there might be a place or part of you that's holding on to something that he doesn't want you to be holding on to. If you want prayer for that, I would be happy to pray for you. Feel free to reach out. And if you know somebody who could use this episode, please share it with them. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining me here, and we'll see you next time.
Well, friends, thank you for joining us today on my Full Life and Faith Leaps podcast. If you enjoyed our time together and are taking away a nugget that has inspired your soul and success, would you share this episode with a loved one who could use it too? And if you haven't already, take a moment to rate and review this podcast and help me help others fuel and fulfill their faith journeys. Until next time, I'm Tiffany Jo Baker, a 3-time surrogate, speaker, and strategizer who loves to help you birth your God-given dreams at home and around the world. Now go do all the things God has called and created you to do with the grace and gifts God has given you.